If you succeed in this vote of no confidence, who will become Prime Minister?
Well, it's an academic now because there is no motion allowed. And for now, I'm the leader of the opposition. I will have to make sure that the coalition remains in force, strong, coherent, with a clear agenda.
Have you struck a deal with Mahathir Mohamad?
Well, since 2018, I've given enough latitude, interference, and clearly we have now moved on to the second phase.
So if you do succeed, it is then fair to say that you will be the Prime Minister. Just to get it out of the way and just to be sure, you'll be the Prime Minister if the opposition succeeds.
Haslinda, I am the leader of the opposition. I have got to make sure that the 107 for now, the opposition members remain intact and committed to the reform agenda. It is not issue of personalities here. People tend to talk about personalities. We are here, we have received a mandate to undertake clear structural reforms in the country. We did manage to an extent, but we were not seen to be too committed, because in the past coalition, as you have seen, yes, on the issues of 1MDB, the excesses of past governments, they were keen, but they were excesses within the administration. And the Anti-Corruption Commission or the enforcement agencies were not as prompt and effective in dealing with the members. And they are now, of course, happily enjoying themselves as new ministers in the new administration under Muhyiddin Yassin as Prime Minister.
Dato' Sri, why should Malaysians trust you and trust the opposition coalition, given that your credibility and that of the party has been dented, given the shocking fall of your coalition?
Well, some members, yes. Greater betrayal and treachery from Bersatu that form the major part of the new coalition. We have 9, but this is not new. It has been brewing for a month or even more than a year. And this was tolerated. That is why I take a tough position that this is not something that has sprung by surprise. It was a well-coordinated, orchestrated event, and it was tolerated. Why I take a tough position against the excessive corruption and treachery is because this was somewhat tolerated by our administration that led to this. They, on their own, they would have never been able to cause so much damage to the party, to the Justice Party. But they were holding key positions in government, lots of resources, and lots of excesses, a lot of financial resources. Why was this tolerated, including by the Anti-Corruption Commission at that time? That is the focus. And people must understand that we are here with a clear mandate to undertake reform, not to condone excesses.
You talk about the horse trading, the betrayal, the defections. How confident are you really of having the majority? Because the claim is that the current government does not have a majority.
Well, if the current government do actually have that confidence, they would have conducted the affairs of Parliament in a more in the usual manner. They did not, giving the pretext or excuse of COVID-19. And clearly they were fearful of the success, a possibility of success of the vote of non-confidence. So issue of legitimacy of the government is in question now. But even then, the frenzy well acknowledged. And this is a coalition without a manifesto, without an agenda, without clear policies. More committed or keen to distribute the riches, enlarge the cabinet to almost 70, with 3 special envoys with ministerial LCs given to all MPs. And this explains that this is not only a fragile government, but also a fractured coalition.
At the center of it all, Dato' Sri, is the Malay vote. I mean, some say that you lost support because your reform agenda goes against Malay interests. How do you intend to win back Malay support, Malay voters?
Firstly, the reform agenda is not at the expense of the Malays. The issue of poverty, for example, the majority of Malaysia, the poor, are the Malays and the Sabah and Sarawak. Our agenda looks at poverty eradication irrespective of race. Similarly, the issue of Bumiputera policy is not to enrich your family members, your children, and your cronies. Affirmative action must be clearly to assist the general public that require opportunities, that require government intervention. And this needs to be explained. But we did not probably explain in the almost 2 years that we had an opportunity to do so. We were, I think, more interested or focused on institutional reform per se, although we were not too successful in that in some areas. But I think if we make it very clear to the Malays and the Bumiputeras that this will be executed effectively and would benefit them in the long run, they would be with us. I mean, I contested in Port Dickson. More than 60% of the Malays supported me. So to assume that the Malays do not support is not entirely true. But what the fact remains that we are facing UMNO and PAS, both using race card and religion. And you know, it is appealing in many ways, but I don't believe that with a clear agenda, with a clear policies, we could not win over the hearts and minds of the Malay base.
You and Dr. Mahathir have talked about the need to rise again in the interest of every young person who dreams of reform. If you were in power, what policies would you put in place immediately to address it? Well,
it is not as easy now because given the economic situation at present, you know, Malaysia is a trading nation, dependent on oil and tourism, and all the 3 sectors are being badly, adversely affected. But I think with the clear policies, with a clear agenda, for example, if we talk about economic policies, we should generate growth, move away from the traditional notion of conventional wisdom about trade and tourism and dependence on oil, and move gradually. We should digitalization, enhancing the quality of education, and also a transparent form of governance that would weed out corruption and abuse of power. And I think this is important. They will give general enough confidence, not only to the locals, to the Malaysian public, but also to the international community and the investing community.
Can you be more specific in terms of what policies you would put in place? I mean, this is an economy that's reeling from the pandemic, also reeling from the slump in oil prices. What would you do differently to revive the economy?
Well, there are areas, for example, that we need to focus on. For example, if you talk purely on the economy, we depend so much on 52 billion ringgit of export of agricultural-related products. We need to refocus on our requirements and need to modernize agriculture. And this at the same time will certainly alleviate the conditions of the fishermen, the smallholders and the farmers, which have been somewhat marginalized and neglected. Secondly, the issue of digitalization and digital economy, we talked about it, but there is a problem of connectivity, there's a problem of infrastructure. We need to refocus on that. And thirdly, on education, which is pivotal to my mind, is to enhance the quality of education rather than arguing about race and schools of a particular vernacular, whatever. I think the focus should be quality education, including enhancing the level of education. I think if we focus on this economy, including back to agriculture, those areas that we ignore the need to support the SMEs in a major manner. Because in the past, it was always big companies, conglomerates, even bailouts by the billions are focused on the big conglomerates. I think we need to refocus on the SMEs because they has enormous potential to rebound the economy.
Dato' Sri, you're a huge proponent of the rule of law. I just want to get your thoughts on the 1MDB case. We recently had Malaysia dropping the charge against Najib Razak's stepson. Do you think that will set the precedent for other graft cases?
Well, it is very dangerous and disturbing precedent. It is, it reflects the lack of understanding and commitment to actual legal reform. You have, for example, the rich, the famous, the political, and the ruling elite given a massive masses, and the poor given a different set of rules. And generally, always law is at the expense of the poor. And in this specific case, I mean, it raised so much resentment and unhappiness. You earn or you take away or squandered and abscond billions, and you can settle for a pittance. And this is not happening in this system, and it just proves that this present government, although I wouldn't deny the fact that we just began and we were not as tough in our resolve, except for against the past administration, 1MDB, but I think there are many other excesses within the administration. My point is that it must be seen to be transparent, open, and clear. The new CJ made certain very convincing and reassuring remarks about the judicial reform. And I think she should have been given all the support to make sure that these excesses, these flaws in the legal system must be given adequate remedy. I think the issue must be reopened, or the issue of these Reza Aziz must be reopened, and Malaysians generally will not accept this.
If you were in power, Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim, how would you resolve the 1MDB issue to do with Najib Razak, to do with Goldman Sachs? What would you do?
Well, some measures, I mean, by the then Attorney General and the government was in that direction. Although I think first with Goldman Sachs, we have to be taking both negotiations and also through the courts here and also the states to solicit support from countries, including United States, Singapore, Switzerland, to help accelerate that process. But I think generally it is still a question of rule of law, and we have failed in this regard, particularly in this recent Reza Aziz case.
Before we let you go, just one final question, Dato' Sri. Do you see the current government staying in power till the next election?
Very unlikely. But for the opposition, to my mind, what is important is our commitment to a reform agenda. People do not just want us to take over. Take over for what? to replace ministers or take over to undertake effective reform to make sure that enough of corruption, enough of excesses, enough of cronyism, enough of compromise on the issue of the rule of law, and to have a system that caters for the welfare of the majority, and not having this political elite jostling for power, who gets what and who gets when. I think it is important to portray and to present a government that's more responsible, that is more accountable to the masses. And when I talk about the masses, I'm talking about the vast majority of the B40 and the M40, and not the top cronies.